Welcome, welcome everyone to the ninth session of the Connect University Autumn School on secure and sustainable digital infrastructures. I'm Alex, I will be your host for the entire week, but today merely warming everyone up for our main topic, the mobile generations game from 1G to 5G and beyond. Now, we started back in 2015 with Connect University, which is the knowledge sharing flagship of DigiConnect. We changed to update both the EU staff and you, the general public, about the latest digital trends, as well as important digital policies. The scope of our sessions in general is to put at the same table EU institutions, industry, academia, and international organizations, helping us find inspiration from each other, as well as identify current opportunities and threats to digital policymaking. For those of you who are not yet connected via Slack.do, we invite you to do so using the code Mobile Generations. I say this because it's over there where you can ask us questions and we will make sure they make their way towards the speakers. Also, in case you want to share any insights on social media, we invite everyone to use the hashtag ConnectUniversity and digital infrastructures when sharing insights on the event on social media. The recording of all sessions will be available as of next week, and you can see them in the Digital EU channel as well as on Futurium. We pretty much invite everyone to join Futurium as it's the place where we engage in discussions on all digital topics and is the place where we also see what's important for you. So maybe we can develop future Connect University sessions. Generally speaking, technology moves pretty fast, so we must run alongside with it, making sure that we have the most up-to-date information so we can reach our destination in good shape. Before we start the session on today, I just want to mention the closing section, which is starting at 2 on EU digital infrastructure in a global ecosystem. The session will recap the most important takeaways of the week. So of all the sessions that we've been through, see how they are connected with each other and as well as with digital policy in general. And furthermore, we will give the EU Commission's plans and concerns for the future in terms of greening digital infrastructures. So for our session of today, on mobile generations, in order to give us a more comprehensive context, as well as shed some light for non-experts such as I, as well as for those of you, of course, which are more fluent in the matter, we have with us today Peter Stuckmann, Head of Unit in Future Connectivity Systems in the European Commission, Francesca Sartori, Principal Solution Architect at Nokia, Maxime Flament, CTO at 5G AA, Donald Morris, Founder and CEO Renzing Services, and Elizabeth Vittori, Group Head of EU Affairs and Relations at Vodafone Group. So without further ado, Peter, please, the floor is yours.
Many thanks, Alex, for this nice introduction, and welcome all the speakers, but also all the participants. So I learned there we have more than 100 registrations, so that's of course a lot, and really happy and honored to talk with you a bit about the mobile generation game, or let's say the generations of mobile technology. I have some slides as background that I will put up. Voila, so Yes, me personally, I'm part of this mobile generation game since the 90s. That was the times of 2G. Some of us had the pleasure to have first mass market phones and voice and SMS services. Me personally, I had this nice Nokia phone 3110, so one of these very famous first phones with an antenna still visible. And real keys. So that was at that time high tech. And well, that was the first generation that, let's say, the mass market used, but it's called 2G because before we had also analog phones. For example, you have maybe seen some car phones that were using analog technology. So that was a bit of a breakthrough, bringing mobile services to everyone basically. And then we had the next generations develop quite fast. So more or less every 10 years, we could observe a new generation. In between, of course, it's an evolution. And we saw, for example, then with on top of 2G, first abilities to send data through the air. And that's led then to the third generation, where we had first email and web browsing capabilities on the phones. And you also maybe remember the BlackBerry, where you could people were busy sending emails and checking emails all the time. And then we had also the next big breakthrough, I think, came also through the iPhone, and end of 3G, but then for the 4G to really bring the internet to the phones and the app economy that most of us using today. This is not the end of the story. So now we see the introduction of 5G. Where we have the needed capacity to have the data growth covered, new services that will develop, and also more than smartphones. It will actually also bring services to the industry. And I hope we see some of the examples with the speakers today. So I don't want to keep you too long with the Commission talk. I just wanted to go through a bit what we are doing, just as illustration at policy level. I have a couple of slides. I will go through them rather fast. Let's see if they're working. You might have seen the digital decade strategy, so around 4 cardinal points to advance the investments, also for the next generation EU budget in this decade, basically. And basically here on the infrastructure connectivity side, we have a target for 5G and we want to bring 5G to all populated areas. Sounds easy, is quite a challenge in terms of investment because the further you go higher in the percentages, especially beyond 90%, the more expensive it is. And then, of course, it's important that everyone participates and also gets the benefits when the technology gets more and more mature. This is how it looks like in terms of time planning. So we had earlier the 5G action plan where until 2025 we want to cover mainly the cities and transport paths, and now then towards the end of the decade also all areas. What is important there also from a public investment, it's mostly about private investment, of course. Operators are rolling out networks, but we, especially in these times of crisis, there's more and more need also to support with public funding, especially in areas where we have market failure, like rural areas, for example. And here we see the recovery plans by the member states, where we asked for more than 20% to have for digital technologies, and a big part of that can be expected for infrastructure. And we see that shaping up in the plans already, where member states are proposing deployment projects also for 5G and fiber developments. We also have multi-country projects that are important. It's important that member states not only do their own thing, but in this big scale investments also work together. And here we have the 5G corridors, MCP, and also other areas where one member state can't do it alone. And especially for 5G corridors, of course, we have this cross-border dimension to make sure that services also function across the borders. How does it look like in terms of deployment in Europe? So we're observing that very closely, also to be sure that our policies are implemented, that we can give recommendations also to the member states how to advance, and maybe take measures also at EU level to advance things, to move forward as we plan. In the moment, we have 66%. That sounds quite high for only 2 years of 5G that it started the deployment. In reality, in some member states, it's still a bit feeling like 4G. It's a bit early, only the start. Sometimes 4G bands are used for 5G. So the real benefits coming step by step, especially when we use the higher frequency bands, where you can have then data rates, let's say more than 500 megabit in the air as capacity. So then shared for the users, of course, partly. But that would make a difference in terms of capacity, how we can carry the data, but also so that you have to wait less or have less delays in your content that goes to your phone, but also faster services are possible. Okay, international comparison, who is interested, you can look at the observatory, 5gobservatory.eu, all these slides, if they will be made available as well. Another area of important is security. I think it was also part of the title here, secure infrastructures. Yeah, secure and sustainable infrastructures is part of this Connect University. It's important when we're using more and more critical services, 5G, that we also make sure that we mitigate all the risks. If we have dependencies on, for example, especially suppliers that might not be trusted. So this, you might have followed this debate also in the press, and we came up with a quite comprehensive toolbox together with the member states addressing these risks. And these are now implemented in every member state, about to be. Then it's not the end of the story, as I said, the 5G is coming, but also then, as I said, every 10 years, in principle, we have a new generation and the technology moves on. So 6G is now, the research is starting, and we have set up a new structure here at European level also to have a cooperation platform for 6G, advancing the vision and research and innovation, but also the deployment. And yeah, this is the first projects are now being launched. In the timeline, what about 6G? Okay, we could say we're just starting 5G, true. So we're starting the research now, and around 2030, we could expect first commercial services. And that would mean that we have now the time to develop the technology, bring it to standardization, and then bring it into products at the end of the decade. First ideas, what could 6G bring? Of course, we don't know yet because these killer applications or the most important applications are developing quite shorter cycles. So we don't know what's really will be the new thing. There are some groups of services that we could think about, and this is important if when you develop the technology that you also have in mind what the technology could enable, so that then you can match that. So some of that goes further to what we see in 5G, for example, manufacturing, so synchronizing robots, but then you can go one step further. If these robots would be really real-time, very low latency, you could, and very secure, you could even have them working alongside humans. So that would be the next step. One other example is that if you go up in the frequencies, you can sense the environment much better. So you can basically bring the data from every phone also to develop massive twinning, how is it called here? And with that, you can enable all kinds of very important societal applications, also for greening the economy and whatever you can imagine with to do with the digital twin of our reality. Telepresence, another one. We're now using WebEx. You're looking at Slido and YouTube. I personally don't think that we will have this kind of setup, hopefully in 2030, 2035. So I think we should have then a bit more seamless interactions, either, well, of course, in person when possible, but if we are on the other side of the planet, it's better maybe not to travel to avoid carbon. And then we can imagine more seamless meetings where you can also have body language, where we have like a real meeting. So this is the telepresence side. Of course, all this has to develop in a sustainable way. And we, of course, have to be also careful while greening the economic sectors, also doing our homework in the networks, not to create something that uses much more energy. So this also has to be addressed, of course. Just as an example, these deployment projects that we're doing now, and also to mention that there's a new call coming. So this 5G corridors is a new program called Connecting Europe Facility 2, where we have around 1 billion foreseen over the whole funding period until 27. And the first call was closed, and we're now implementing the projects. It's around 9 works project and same number for studies, roughly. And these studies are now preparing for the next wave. And we will have a call in the third quarter this year, in the fourth quarter this year, coming out with deadline beginning of next year for these 5G corridors. So that's to be kept in mind. We will also have info days, hopefully planned then October, November. And then also to mention, not only 5G corridors are in the CEF program, we also have so-called 5G for smart communities, which is a bit more local projects where often the public authority comes with the consortium and ideas for use cases, and then develops that in the local environment. So this is coming up, and you're of course invited also with the same time planning as just mentioned to submit. It's not yet confirmed the exact date, but we will soon announce. And then we're also building communities around this program. It's quite attractive. Can be reimbursed up to 75% of the infrastructure costs. We're facilitating online communities on the platform Futurium, and also try to spread best practice in relevant events. So this is more for the local community, while the corridors before is a more large-scale environment, pan-European. Okay, so that's just a snapshot a bit what the DG Connect and the Commission is doing in the area of mobile generations and 5G and 6G in the moment. And this hopefully was interesting. And we now come to the real stuff. So what is the market doing? What are the stakeholders doing? And what are they thinking 5G can bring? And also maybe explaining a bit how does it fit in this generation game? So I would then hand to Francesca Sartori from Nokia Bell Labs to give her first talk. I would say, I don't know if it was agreed before, like 10, 15 minutes, and then maybe some questions to clarify, and then we can have a discussion at the end after the other speakers, if that would be okay. Over to Francesca.
Thanks so much, Peter. Let me start sharing my presentation. Okay, do you see? Should be visible, right?
Excellent, yeah.
Excellent, thanks so much. Thanks so much for having me here, inviting me here. Very, very happy for this. Okay, as I said, Francesca Sartori from Nokia Standard. And when I received the title of this session, I will say, okay, 15 minutes from 1G to 5G. That is a lot. I should have 15 hours, not 15 minutes. In fact, if you see, the journey is very long since the first wireless call in 1973 done by Martin Cooper in New York. So in fact, the generation after generation, we have changed. The wireless technology has evolved, and the step by step has integrated the different domains, different worlds, digital and physical and human. And with 6G, we see that all these worlds, they are going to converge and fuse together. So in this way, we'll help the humanity to be more free and to really use all the potential. So you see, it's almost 50 years. Next year will be 50 years. And in 50 years, we have evolved this technology from the poor connectivity to much wider scope. And let's see which is the context and the trend that they are going to have happening or we can see from the next 10 decades, 15 years, that can shaping up, can influence the technology evolution. So, of course, we need to consider the users. Users are the king, the most important element of the equation. So at the beginning, we had the classical consumer users. That was starting from the GSM time or even earlier, so that we always refer to users as a consumer. But the more we evolve the technology, moving from 4G to 5G and beyond, the users has really created a wider scope. And as you can see now, we see four different kind of users. Of course, a consumer, as usual, but then also industry, enterprises, and developers. Why so? Because they have different requirements, they use the network in different way, but they have some commonalities. All of them, they are really aiming to an evolved experience. Only connectivity, best effort connectivity is not more enough. Everybody is looking for an immersive experience where we have really surrounded by much more enhanced capability to use the use cases and the services. Services that can be also vary based on if you are an industry or enterprises, think about if you have a critical mission services, you cannot support or have only a best effort connection. You need to have a much more extreme superb connectivity. So you need to really tune the network based on the services. And also we can see that these users, they may start engaging together in the digital first. So we are going in a different interaction level, and as well as the criteria, how to choose an application, how to purchase an application will go much beyond the pure cost. There are other elements that makes a person or an entity define and choose some application, like for example the shareability or the consumability. So the network really need to cope with all these requirements. But of course these users are embedded, of course they live in a specific socio-economic and geopolitical environment. As Peter mentioned, security sustainability, quite familiar, I guess, for everyone, will be one of the two of the most important drivers, and they're impacting a lot of technical decisions. But on top of this, there are also the sovereignty. So some local regional guidance may impact the trend evolution as well. And of course, this in a context that everybody lives also today, a kind of certain instability. So in this context, with this requirement, we will focus on the technology. There are a lot of technology evolving together, but the majority of them are converging to support the famous metaverse. I guess everybody has already get familiar with this metaverse word. So the technology, there are some technologies that are really essential, embedded, like artificial intelligence, machine learning, or blockchain, or the wireless evolution. But there are also other technologies that they have their own life, like a cloud and Web3, but they will be essential for deploying the overall metaverse context. So like cloud with edge cloud and Web3, let's see with this digitalization. So these are more or less the major areas that we can see shaping up, and they're converging, impacting, coexisting together in the next part of this decade and moving forward or beyond 2030. But let's have a focus a little bit where we are today with the telecommunication and the wireless telecommunication. So I would focus on the 5G and 6G era, because 1, 2, and 3, and 4 are already up and running in our life. We are very familiar to, but what is expecting from us in the next 10 years? So we launched 5G back in 2019, 2020. That was, as Peter said, every 10 years we have a new generation coming. So it's a kind of a really, at the beginning of the decade, 2020 was linked with the 5G. We launched, and we have already more than 230 5G networks deployed around the globe with a different maturity, but already a good number. Okay. LTE, of course, or 4G are still bigger, but as you see, we are really evolving the network over 5G. 5G is already focused on much more user experience, mainly on downlink. We open up with a different domain that the consumer. So we are starting really introducing the telecommunication and the new experience in the industrial and in different verticals. But this is 5G, and these are the first phases, the first releases. Then we enter in the middle between 5G and 6G that we so-called 5G advanced. That is where now the specification is happening. So of course, advanced is already embedded in the name. We are extending and evolving the capabilities. It's not only downlink experience, but we are really emphasizing the uplink, because you can imagine there are a lot of also uplink requirements, better coverage, and in order to create a fully immersive experience. And then we also enlarge the domain, the vertical domain that can benefit from this technology evolution. Moving forward, we enter in the 6G era that, as Peter said, is still shaping up. We are still designing the possible concept, but of course the trend will be similar. So of course we extend this interaction, human interactions, the experience that we expect beyond maybe immersive. We will have also haptic. We extended the sensory, not only ear and eyes, but also the touch. And of course, in terms of enterprises or industrial, we will really boost the capability in terms of digital twin, and we will move forward in much more real-time synchronization application. So this is more or less where we are in terms of wireless technology from this happening now in the next 10, 12 years time. Okay, now let's move in what is a 5G Advanced? Why I would want to focus on 5G Advanced is because where is the specification and all the research is happening. 5G has been specified, so they are the first 3 releases. But now the focus is on 5G Advanced. That has a very particular characteristic. So while 5G really focus in the famous, if you should know, the famous triangle in eMBB, in ultra reliable low latency, and in massive machine time communication, so the corner of the triangle, and each releases can be in a way compared or linked to each corner. With the 5G Advanced, we aim to combine the domains and really to explore much more enhanced and wider services that can combine 2 different domains, eMBB and ultra reliable latency, in where we can extend the experience of the human going exactly in the XR domain, where we are really indoor and outdoor experience that I want to stress, because of course they have 2 different capabilities, 2 different requirements. And also, we are also extending the quality of the experience beyond the classical coverage. So this is very important because we can combine the famous throughput, so the capacity of the network to deliver the data, and the real time, and the capability to really be reactive to the human and the services. Then we extend also this capability beyond the classical coverage. In fact, we extend also the devices. So in fact, we will go beyond the smartphone as such with a drone camera and the so-called red cap devices. We will extend even beyond the classical national coverage in terms of seaside through the satellite. And we extend even the domain, like, for example, going to the railways domain. So we will enhance the capability of the GSMR and or even the sensoring. So you see, in this way, we are really combining the throughput, the capability of the eMBB, but also the sensoring factor that is the machine massive time communication. And then we have an expansion. Why? Because we expand the services on top of the connectivity. We will be able to also to provide a new kind of services, such as the positioning and the time synchronization. So these are 2 new enablers that can open up for multiple new services based on the positioning that can be as an alternative or a complementary to the classical satellite positioning system, and the time synchronization that also can be a redundant 1+1 or alternative or combined with the classical synchronization system already existing in each nation. And last but not least, we have excellencies. That is really cross-domain that target to really enhance the quality of the network and optimize the network and make it much more efficient in order to have really TAS-0 orchestration, means the capability to have a network that self-adapt itself and also focus on energy saving and all the sustainability factor. So in order to really reduce the carbon footprint. So this is very important because this will be closing and extending the 5G in the overall experience capabilities, but at the same time is paved the way to 6G, because some of those areas that are going to be analyzed and researched in the 5G advance will be embedded in the 6G. So like, for example, artificial intelligence machine learning will be starting with the 5G advance and then extended in the 6G. But even another important factor that will be really relevant in the wireless communication in the next 5 or 10 years will be the metaverse. And it's worth to spend a few minutes on that. So in our view, the metaverse has the 3 different major opportunities. The consumer that we are very familiar with. So we know already what we expect, augmented reality, virtual reality, all these possible interactions. But we will see also where the metaverse can go beyond the consumer and enhance the capability of enterprises and as well as industrial, in order to improve the safety, the productivity, and the efficiency of those areas. So this metaverse is not only one, but is 3 metaverse in our opinion. And all of them has different, similar enablers. The devices that of course are much more relevant for the human, and you will see that we go ahead with the timing. The devices they become much more enhanced and evolved. So the classical smartphone become with the white glasses, and then we go even to optical or even 3D. So this means that the human augmentation will be part of this metaverse. But from industrial enterprise point of view, we have this a fusion between digital and physical. And the most relevant element is the digital twins. That is, we already has started already, but it will be much more enhanced in the metaverse domain with the sensoring and all the interoperability ecosystem and even beyond that. So these are the 2, let's say, a kind of matrix, 3 opportunities and 2 enablers that will explore the metaverse capabilities. So just to conclude, it's really happening. So all this evolution is not on the paper, it's not just a slide set, but it's really, there are a lot of researchers where we are really been working for more than 5 years in shaping up the telecommunication is going to be in between 2030 and beyond 2030. As I said, we will have now the 5G, 15, 16, and 17. So are the first releases already designed and already going to be deployed in field. 18 is a starting point with the release 5G Advanced, and 19, 20. So these 3 are the 5G Advanced, and they are going to, let's say, keep our researchers occupied in the next 3 years or so. And then, of course, we will start entering at the end of this decade, where we will start with a 6G standardization, and we aim to have the first commercial 6G network in field by 2030 and beyond. So you see, it's really a journey that we are really now moving from the classical connectivity. We extended the user's experience, and then we extend also the domain from the connectivity, pure telecommunication in other enterprises and industrial possibility. So this is more or less my very 50 minutes to 50 years story. Thanks so much.
Many thanks, Francesca. So this was very impressive, and you even kept the time. So indeed, 50 years, you went back in history. This is very exciting. Of course, mass market is more 90s, but indeed, I mean, the first technology foundations were already done and first services before that. And very interesting also to see how you see that evolving in terms of use opportunities and what we need to do to enable in the next years, especially in the standardization that we, of course, also preparing in our programs. There are already some interesting questions, so let's make it a bit interactive and look at them. I think we can pick 2 main ones here on what was posted. One is, okay, why do we need 5G? I don't even have 4G. I think there,
Okay.
my take would be that in the target, so it's a political target, where we say 5G everywhere. When you look at rural areas or challenging areas to deploy, I think if you get 4G, then you can also put 5G because it's more or less the same frequencies for the wide coverage. So at the end, it's not we decide 4G or 5G. It's really pushing that these services are available everywhere. And when you then get a decent 4G connection with a fiber to the base station, you can also put a 5G on top. That's a bit how I see it. So I wouldn't worry too much if it's 4G or 5G. Important is that mobile services get everywhere with a decent quality. And that's important.
And remember, 5G
Francesca.
started just exactly 5G started 2 years ago, right? We've been talking about 5G for I don't know, I think a decade, because I remember in Mobile World Congress 2014 I was talking about 5G, but when we were talking the time was a researcher. Like now we're talking 6G is a researcher, really. And the real commercial network has launched in 1920. So then it's 2 years time, and it takes time to roll out properly all the network. 5G or 4G takes time to have a proper, decent connection. And as you said, 4G and 5G, as long as we stay in a consumer, it's already a good starting point. But then, of course, when we have a more richer use cases, we need to have a much more stronger network, right?
Yeah. And then one interesting one, you also mentioned it, this potential damage of cybercrime, and you put it in the trillions in your slide. And there was a question here saying now with the crisis with Russia, how easy is it to switch off our networks? I mean, I let you also give your views, Francesca, but what we also know in the cybersecurity area is that we have these attacks every day, everywhere. So, and also, of course, coming from that side of the planet. So if they could do it, they would have probably already done it. That doesn't mean that we don't have to work more and protect these infrastructures, because certainly now the efforts in the last months since the war has started have certainly gone up a lot, and there was an increase in attempts. But yeah, I would say it's not that they didn't try it. But Francesca, what would be your take on that?
Absolutely. Security is embedded in any piece of the network, right? So we cannot have a network without security protections. So security is really in any single soft line of code is there, in any single specification we are thinking about security. So it's we are really focused on this as well as sustainability, in particular for 5G and 6G. So these two elements are even not you cannot recognize within the specification, because every single thinking is considering these two elements. So I wouldn't see a network without security or a network without aiming to improve the energy efficiency, right?
Excellent. Then we see a question on edge, but that maybe I would also leave to Maxime. Maybe if you could cover it a bit. Of course, we need, especially when we talk to automotive, we need to know, we need to be real time, we need to, it's safety. So
edge computing will be one of the key elements of differentiation in moving forward toward metaverse, yes.
So I take the opportunity then, Francesca, of course, you're invited to stay also for a discussion if we have time at the end, if your time allows. But then I would now move, I think, Alex, the next speaker is Maxime Flamand, correct? Many thanks, Francesca, for the time being. It was really great presentation.
Yes.
So, yes. So I will then hand over to Maxime, who is already sharing. Thanks a lot. Over to you. We can't hear you yet. You're muted.
Yes.
Now better. Thanks.
There I am. Thank you very much, Peter, for the invitation. I really appreciate giving this glimpse of what to expect by using 5G, and in this case, using this in the automotive verticals. I gave a presentation about 2 years ago or so to Connect University, and I can tell you that things have been evolving quite rapidly, and so this is an update. Now the talk will look at 5G, just an introduction, and then we look at how we actually deploy connected vehicles worldwide and at scale using 3GPP technologies. And I will give a few examples of use cases along our roadmap. So hang on. So first, 5G Automotive Association is an organization, an initiative that brings together the automotive and telecommunication industries. All the vehicle manufacturers and the tiers are included, except one or two at the global level. And we also include the mobile network operators, the suppliers, and many of the IT solution suppliers like the chip vendors and edge computing or cloud service suppliers. And we address the mobility needs in a way that we, of course, look at viable commercial and comfort services that drivers and users like to have, but also we try to look at and target the societal needs with smarter, safer, and environmentally sustainable services. And in the long term, we look at the eventuality of higher automated driving, even though this is not, well, sometimes there is an amalgam being made between connected and automated driving, but this does not need to be always the case. We are about 125 industry members and from all around the world, truly a global activity. And we have just celebrated our 5 years anniversary. A little bit on CV2X, cellular V2X. It's based on mobile network standards. It's widely recognized around the world. So we are looking at obviously 3GPP standards, and we try to keep within that family of standards because most of the vehicle manufacturers are preparing or have already done their strategy to connect to the mobile network. So it's very important to keep that within that family of standards and work with 3GPP along the different batches of specs that are called releases, and which come about every 18 months or 24 months. We are at the moment at release 18, but we really have started in release 14 around 2017. It was finalized 2017, and actually 5G AA was created September, October 2016, really at the moment when we realized that an automotive vertical was really needed to make sure that the needs of the automotive industry was met in the scope of the 3GPP standards. And so what it is about, it's putting obviously all vehicle and road users connected to the mobile network, but also making sure that we can also use other radio access technologies between vehicles, so V2V, V2I for infrastructure connectivity, as well as including all vulnerable road users that are actually representing more than 50% of the casualties today. Now, to make it clear, we use two complementary communication modes. What we call the UU, the mobile network communication, it's using the licensed spectrum bands, and for which you will always need a subscription and a SIM card or eSIM card. And then on the right side, an important part in the building block of the connectivity of the vehicle is the PC5, the jargon says, the direct communication and bringing the V2V, V2I, V2P if it's connected. And that would be then operating in a 5.9 gigahertz band. It's called the ITS band, and it's independent of the cellular network operation. So even though even if you would not have a coverage, you would still be able to operate this radio access. Now, where are we today in terms of market deployment of V2X? Most of it is done with the 4G mobile networks at this stage, even though we start to see the automotive industry introducing 5G connectivity in their vehicles. About 200 million cars are connected worldwide at this stage. We're counting 30% of which is in Europe. And we are, by the way, we are not counting the compulsory e-call connectivity, by the way. So then this is really the active connections that are done with the vehicles. Some member states are actually very advanced in terms of digitalizing their roads. Here I'm taking the example of the Netherlands, where we have 130,000 of kilometers that are covered in their digital monitoring program. And they have more than 2.2 million daily users, and not, I mean, most of them, I would say a big chunk of them are using over-the-top applications such as Spitzmeister or Waze. And these enable also the possibility to connect to 1,000 smart traffic lights that are, for example, giving information about their signal phase and timing. Today, 15% of cars are connected in Europe, and then in 2021 we have seen 70% of new vehicles sold with 4G LTE. Very low amounts, obviously, with 5G. It's ramping up. 30% of the total EU fleet will be connected by 2025. And 2025 also starts to see an increasing number, so 20% of them, of the vehicles sold with 5G, which is obviously backward compatible with 4G, so you don't necessarily need a 5G network on the road, but this is a good sign that things are ramping up very rapidly. And 2027, we can see that 40% of the total EU fleet would be connected with 4G and 5G. And that would mean that there we start really a critical mass of vehicles that can start to report on dangers and then also receive warnings. Okay, so how does it evolved from our perspective at 5GA? We saw that since 2016, it was really the start of the wide deployment of what we call these V2X services. It was using mobile network. We see that more or less in Europe, we have 10 million new cars every year that can be connected to that network, and it mainly delivers local hazard warnings and hyperlocal traffic information. Now, in 2021, well, we see the introduction of what we call basic safety messages, thanks to the short-range radio. In Europe, it's actually using another technology, it's a Wi-Fi-based technology for which we have tried to a little bit contract, because we believe this is a too old technology and not in line with 3GPP. But in other parts of the world, China being the first mover with 15 vehicle manufacturers having adopted LTE V2X, and then Ford in US and Audi having adopting as we speak LTE V2X in the upper 20 megahertz of the 5.9 gigahertz band. Then we look at 2025, which will be the turning point where the real role of connectivity comes for advanced driving, including automation. And this will require a step up that we believe is needed with 5G, which by the way, 5G V2X is already standardized. We are testing it, and we are looking at refining all the profiles so that it can be used at scale by the automotive market. And in fact, we are working on a use case roadmap that I'm going to show now. Yes, this is the newest version of our roadmap. We try to update it every 18 months or so. It spans until 2030, point at which we believe that it will the full power of 5G will actually be used by the automotive. I will tell you about the current use cases in the next slides. I'm not sure you can see my pointer. So I will briefly look at the bottom part, what exactly is done at the at the lower use case level, and then I will briefly look at the upper part with the more future kind of use cases. I'm sure I could say much more on that, and so perhaps I need to go on. Let me just bring. Oh, yeah. So first, I give you a very simple example from BMW, and actually a few years ago we thought that all these use cases would be done via vehicle-to-vehicle communication or vehicle-to infrastructure. That means that we thought that 5 years ago it would use the short-range communication, and with the increase in capabilities of 4G and 5G, we realized that you can deploy at scale much faster these kind of services using the mobile network. And this one is a very easy example. You have a limited range of the sensors. You have a car which is perhaps from the same brand or not up front that is detecting a slippery road, for example. It reports this information to a location platform via the mobile network, and the location platform can then cross-check it with its digital map match it, data, basically aggregate information, perhaps make sense out of it, normalize it, anonymize it, and process it to the point that it can then issue a warning to the customers. This was more or less what was planned in 2016. And here I give the other example from another competitor, Mercedes. And basically, I can tell you that it evolved widely among almost all European brands, BMWs, Mercedes, I mentioned them, Audi, Volvo, etc., etc. And the challenge in the past few years was to avoid a silo effect between these brands and make sure that eventually these kind of warnings could be then shared among the different participants, and not only within one single brand. And now we're seeing that this trend is emerging in all cars at all levels today. Recently we are looking at hyperlocal slippery roads, wrong-way driving, potholes, even traffic information coming from the connected infrastructure and smart cities. Now, let me just give you 3 examples or a few examples of what we are talking about when we are talking about 5G V2X. 5G V2X in our roadmap starts really to kick in around 5G, around the 25, 27. And I could say that a lot is coming from the edge compute. And this slide is really showing what edge compute is without and trying to demystify it a little bit. Edge basically is simply a way to increase the computing power closer to the mobile user, and it enables really these local and low latency end-to-end services that are needed in, for example, these cases where you start collecting data from a large amounts of different sources, detecting potential problems, and then disseminating this information to the right people. And you can imagine that at an intersection, a simple intersection, you can start gathering as much data from sensors, for example, scanning technologies, LiDAR camera around the intersection, also getting information from the traffic lights, putting that into your edge that is consuming this information, but at the same time getting as much information as possible from cars that are running an app, for example, but also these could also deliberately send this information to the edge, not necessarily being supported by the app. And by the way, quite some machine learning is expected in this these kind of use cases, because the power of the machine learning would be then to identify within an intersection where are the hotspots, the spots where a risk actually occur most often, and then make sure that these risks are mapped with the possible collision and incidents that are being detected dynamically. Another example of edge compute is when cars start to share their information, the information about what they have detected, or simply to share the information about their camera, and the edge could start to here in this case show that the pedestrian is a pedestrian is detected. That detection can be done either by the car, but also by the edge. And if another car is overtaking, in this case, looking at this car and this car number 2, a warning is then initiated by the edge to the car. So there are two different ways of doing this, as I said, using the edge or using the computing power that is embedded in the cars. And then finally, I give you a glance of the teleoperated driving, for which we have published 3 technical reports, and it enables really shared remote assistance, but also remote driving services coming from a central location. Now, this central location can be a manned person, but it can be also an automated entity. So, and the examples given here are the most low-hanging fruit, I would say, the early fields of applications of a long set of possible use cases. And where we see really the lowest hanging fruit is automated valet parking in warehouses, as well as unmanned operation in harbors and mines. And then finally, a little bit of a policy aspect, because we are actually trying to give a little bit of advocacy within 5GA. And at European level, we are looking specifically at the revision of the ITS directive. And we are insisting on the fact that legislation across the board should always be technology neutral, and so that we should not say, let's use the older technology to do this. If we would do that, then today we would still be stuck with fax to send a letter. So we really need to be careful with the terms technology neutrality, backward compatibility, as well as making sure that we always welcome future technologies in the way we frame legislation. And that concludes my talk, basically saying that 4G, 5G will be in vehicles. There are millions of vehicles that are already using safety and traffic applications. Data collected from the vehicle will become the main data source for the monitoring of the traffic in near real time. An evolution towards 5G will really be needed as vehicles become more automated. And the edge, finally, will be an essential feature to ensure the low latency of the connected services at scale. Okay, that was a mouthful, and I realized that I used my 20 minutes. I thought I would do that in actually 5 minutes less, but yeah, it's always exciting to talk about these things. You know me, Peter.
No, we appreciate your enthusiasm, Maxime, as usual. Very, very good. We will soon have a small break, but maybe we can take before that some of the Slido questions. One question was, what is the equivalent for 3GPP? I think 3GPP is a global standard, but maybe you could take the opportunity to explain a bit the situation of these technologies in Europe, in the US. There was recently a US court decision that was quite important. How do you see this globally emerging, this ecosystem?
Yeah, I mentioned it earlier. So the 3GPP standard related to the short-range communication is being used in China and will be used in US as the core technology for the short-range communication. But this being said, the 4G and 5G connectivity to the mobile network is a done deal for all vehicle manufacturers in the next future. So we know that all vehicle manufacturers are preparing today to equip 100% of their new vehicles sold with 4G, 5G mobile network. And then when we are looking at Korea, we are seeing that there is still tests ongoing between the Wi-Fi based technology and the 3GPP technology for the short-range communication. We believe that with the interaction that we got so far, that they will favor the 3GPP technologies, but still there is still question marks, and a decision should take place in 2023. Now, when we are looking at Europe, Europe is a little bit of a tough nut to crack. We have had large investments and already some deployments related to Wi-Fi based technology for short range, and therefore we will have, and unfortunately the Wi-Fi and the 3GPP, as you know, are not compatible. So you're not going to be able at the radio level to talk to each other. So what you have to make sure is that you use at the service level, you make sure that the services can still work even though the radios are not working. And so that's why the connectivity to the mobile network is so important, because it can be used as a safety net for ensuring service level continuity and compatibility.
Many thanks. Then there was one question, maybe it's the final one here in this round, on public transport automation in the cities. How do you see that emerging?
So clearly, I mean, I didn't talk about it because our members are not necessarily about the public transport community, but clearly for cities, public transport are an early user of the connectivity. This can, I mean, and it's already happening. And so the fleet management and fleet monitoring, as well as also then all kind of signal preemptions for the fleets are already in place in smart cities and evolving very rapidly. The same for first responders, ambulances, police, and etc. They are the ones that are the early adopters of connectivity in cities and making use of these to save lives.
Dear colleagues, so we're back for the second part of the Connect University, the mobile generation game. So really happy to have two more speakers in this session, and then we have some time to have some discussions. So now I have the pleasure to hand over to the third external speaker, who is Maurice Donal. We're working with Maurice as part of our projects. He's CEO of RedSync Services and will give us some interesting insights also on 5G applications. In this case, a bit more on the health side, I think, but of course up to Maurice to tell us. Over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Peter. My name is Donal Morris, and I'm with RedSync. We're a company in Ireland, and we've been involved in European projects for the past few years with the 5G public-private partnership. And our focus really is on mobile telemedicine. So I'm just going to tell you some of the things that have happened in mobile telemedicine and how we can help. So I'm going to share my screen now, and just bear with me while I get this fired up. My presentation is coming now. So really, we provide mobile telemedicine for paramedics, for emergency services, for doctors and nurses and paramedics who are on the move. And I'd just like to tell you a little bit about it, how it's evolved from 1G to 5G and beyond, from the point of view of the paramedics and medical people who are moving around. So I suppose one of the first ones was Morse code. So Morse code was used a long time ago for communications, and this is even before 1G. So the reason I'm putting this here is just to look at the different levels. So Morse code was used a long time ago for communications, probably more for long distance and for radio, but some I'm sure was used for emergency communications, but very, very sporadically. And basically it's dots and dashes, and it's just a really simple binary communications method. And then there's also Vhf radio. So Vhf radio has been around for 50, 60, 70 years, and that's been used still is today in some emergency services. It's reliable, it's simple, and it's a well-proven technology. It's limited in terms of it doesn't really have digital, but it has really reliable voice, and VHF radio works within small distances, maybe 30, 40, 50 kilometers, and it's pretty good, but it's just for voice. So that's still used by some emergency services. And then, of course, there's the 1G analog cell phones, which were I suppose came out before I never had one, so they've obviously came out before I had a interest in buying phones. But they were the first type of phones, and probably not really used by the emergency services. Maybe a little bit, but mostly I think they were still using VHF radio. And then, of course, 2G came along, and everybody started to get mobile phones back in the 1990s. Nokia, and a famous brand, and then, of course, because digital came along for the consumer, digital came along for the emergency people as well. So they got 2G audio using digital communications, but had a private network. So Tetra is a private network, but is very narrow band bit rate. So good for voice, and probably a small small data channel for small amounts of data, the same as 2G phones have for texting, but really not sufficient for anything like video or any of the modern things that we're doing today on 5G and planning for 6G. But certainly had some digital, and Tetra is well used today. It's terrestrial trunked radio, used to be called Trans-European trunked radio. It came out from ETSI. It uses time division multiplex. There's 4 channels, 1 radio carrier, and it's a European standard. And Europe has always been fantastic with the mobile phones coming from Europe and ETSI and 3GPP. Europe has always played a strong role in communications. So that's really Tetra. And then, of course, what happened, Tetra, there was some leapfrog going on, because Tetra is good and reliable with voice, and was giving communication systems for emergency. So it's like a 2G technology, but not really providing 2G and 3G, not really providing enough bandwidth for video. So really what the industry had to do then is leapfrog to 4G and to 5G to get video to the next level. And really that's what's happening now. And why is that happening? Well, in the healthcare sector, there's lots of different challenges. So there's no visual access for an expert. There have been voice, but no visual expert for remote expert. There's been lack of information in the healthcare system. That means there's additional resources and can be time delays, and lack of resources, lack of information, time, all of this leads to extra cost in healthcare systems. Now then what comes along on 4G and 5G, that gives the potential for wearable video, really. So the idea of wearable video is that a paramedic at the scene of a patient can be wearing a video headset. They can have a smartphone, and the video can get from the wearable video on the headset to a remote doctor, and that can go on 4G and Wi-Fi and 5G, of course. And that's really the situation now today, where 5G is now looking, 4G is quite ubiquitous, 5G is in some of the areas, it's non-standalone, and standalone is coming over the next 2 years. And really this is now giving a new opportunity for a medical person in the field to wear a camera, and the video gets sent back to a senior medical person in the control room. Can be either a colleague, a peer, can be a more senior person who has different expertise. So this really brings a whole new dimension now to pre-hospital medical services, because now you can do something that you couldn't do before. You can see what's happening, and this can bring whole new sets of efficiencies into healthcare. And what is really happening, so 4G and 5G are giving really better image definition. So on 4G, you're getting 640 by 480 picture size. Sometimes you're getting 1280 by 720, 1 megapixel, and sometimes then you're getting 2 megapixel. It's really constrained on the uplink bandwidth because it's asymmetrical. All the resource blocks in 4G are done asymmetrically. For video, for emergency services, you really want to have the video in the uplink bandwidth from the field back into the core network and distributed to the hospital or the call center. But the resource blocks tend to be 15% of resources are on the uplink, and about 85% are on the downlink. And ADSL is designed like that too, and the 4G is designed like that. But then 5G gives a possibility for more bandwidth and gives a much higher potential for higher picture definition, and then can give slicing with dedicated network, dedicated quality of experience, and with service isolation, giving more security. And really, this is a picture of a typical current practice in pre-hospital and what a future practice might look like. So this is from the Irish model and the UK model. Other countries have different types of emergency services models, but let's just look at what it might be today. So you have the current practices. You have triage. There's the ambulance goes to a patient. There's a patient history assessment. There's extended physical and mental examinations, and then the patient goes to the emergency department in the ambulance. And what's happening there? Well, there's two kind of cases. There's one case where it's an acute case, and it just takes time to bring the patient to the hospital. And then there's also sometimes there's unnecessary conveyance, because sometimes patients don't really need to go to the hospital, but the risk gets propagated to the emergency department because there's maybe they need a doctor to make that decision, but the doctor is not in the vehicle, and the patient gets brought to the ambulance, to the emergency department. Or sometimes a doctor in different countries, a doctor can be in a second vehicle and can come later. So there's all different models, but it really can mean sometimes it takes time to give the treatment, and sometimes for low acuity cases, it's an unnecessary conveyance. But what can happen now that 4G and 5G are giving video into pre-hospital emergency services, the doctor can be virtually present. That means you can have a doctor to paramedic discussion, a doctor to patient discussion, and you can have real-time instructions from the doctor for extended assessments. Now that can then lead to two things. That can lead to accelerated treatment for high acuity cases. So you can have a standard operating procedure applied with more accurate triage, more rapid decisions, accelerated treatment, and improved efficiency. And then for low acuity cases, you have the potential to treat at scene, make safe decisions, provide first aid, offer an effective follow-up plan. So instead of bringing the patient to the hospital, you direct the patient to their GP the next day or at a suitable time, and you provide first aid services only for low acuity. So that's two models, and that's how really 4G and 5G can help with pre-hospital medical care. So it's really about improving triage, because you've got different skill profiles. You have paramedics or community nurses or remote doctors, and you've got call centers, you've got doctors in the hospitals, senior doctors with more experience, and then you've got different locations. You've got things happening in the field, on the roadside, in the home, in the clinic. And the whole potential now for video, wearable video, mobile telemedicine with 4G and 5G gives the whole potential to improve the triage process, gives the potential for more collegiate support. So instead of being a community nurse on her own or his own in a rural healthcare center, can now get support. Maybe 9 times out of 10, they're able to treat the patient, but occasionally a patient comes in who has some severe issue where they need to get a specialist. So that gives the whole opportunity for more collegiate support to get help from somebody when you need to get that help. And it just improves the whole operation process. And this is a huge, big opportunity within the healthcare sector to improve all of these different things. So what have we done? Our company, we've developed Blue Eye. It's wearable video. It's small cameras that can be worn on the head, and they can follow the point of view, the direction of the head of the person who's treating it, whether it's the paramedic or the ambulance technician at the patient in an emergency vehicle, whether it's the community nurse or a junior doctor in a remote clinic. And the video gets sent over the Blue Eye cloud, and the remote doctor is able to see what's happening. And really, it's a small camera, secure and Gdpr compliant. It's an integrated but wearable solution, sending live video to the doctor over 4G and 5G and also Wi-Fi, and giving back diagnosis, treatment, and support, because it means that the doctor can see what the nurse is doing, and that doctor can give help, if necessary, when the important time. I spoke to one doctor recently, and he told me that he measured once, he walked on one shift, he walked 17 kilometers around the hospital. So going from one patient to the next. And that just, he's a very experienced person. That's just 17 kilometers walking when he's not treating. So that just shows you, how much inefficiency there is in a doctor's time. And 4G and 5G with wearable video can just help make the doctor's life more efficient. So really, it's applicable for all sorts of critical communications on the move, paramedics, nurses, doctors, even medical students. The video getting sent back with real-time point of view video and audio to doctors in the emergency departments, specialist doctors, and even educators, and giving the chance for critical incident management, diagnosis, and treatment support. And there's lots of different use cases that we have. We've got them in pilot in lots of different places. This one on the top right is disaster recovery. That we did that's a pilot with a 5G project in Istanbul for an earthquake scenario. The one on the bottom right is with Oslo Ambulance Service. That's a mannequin that the paramedic is treating, but basically he's injecting a pneumothorax, injecting a small needle to deal with a collapsed lung. The one in the middle at the bottom is junior doctor training. And the one on the left, that's a pilot we did in Dublin for a brain injury seizure. And then the one at the top is a pilot in the 5G Heart project with Groningen Ambulance Service treating burn victims. And this, although it looks like a strong burn, that's a mock-up of a burn in an actress who has makeup to simulate that. So lots of different outside the hospital use cases and also inside the hospital use cases. It was used in Corona for different isolation, corona isolation, also used for teaching, and various different inside the hospital application. We're in lots of European Commission projects with pilots active all over Europe in the 5G Epicenter project, the 5G Heart project, and the Health 5G project. It's really easy to use. It enables connection, streaming, and for the remote paramedic to get access, the doctor to get access, a senior paramedic to get access to this situation. It's 2 megapixel camera, also gives GPS information, snapshotting, video and audio capability, recording available for teaching, not for operations, but for teaching, and gives point of view video, remote reality, lightweight, simple, sturdy. So really that's the summary of the technology. And what does 5G then give above 4G? So 5G is giving 4G, all of the packets are together. So it's on the left-hand side, you have everyday internet traffic. So a telemedicine call is treated the same as a teenager watching, cats on skateboards on YouTube, and it's treated at the same priority. But with 5G, with the partnership with the telco, using slicing, you can get emergency traffic prioritized. So you can have different resource blocks allocated for emergency and different resource blocks allocated, say, for playing everyday calls. And that just gives a new situation. And these techniques work using slicing. So slicing is giving private IP addressing, giving extra levels of security. It's also giving the mobile edge cloud, giving extra security, gives private APN, gives extra security. And then the resource blocks. So in the resource blocks in the radio level, there's the quality class indicators. So using this technique with 5G, you can also request quantums of bandwidth using QCI2 or QCI4, that's quality class indicator 2 or quality class indicator 4. You can specify this traffic gets a certain quality of class, particularly for video, and that differentiated, say, from plain old internet traffic, which would have a QCI value of 9 for best effort traffic. So these are the different things that can happen with 4G moving to 5G for the emergency services. And of course, 6G is coming. 6G will then offer capability for the metaverse grade networks, but that's something for 5 or 6 years down the line. So thanks very much for listening. I'm available to talk to answer any questions, and please let me know if you'd like to ask me a question. Thank you.
Many thanks, Donald. So we have some questions already in the chat that we might address now.
Sure.
One is interesting on the implementation side. Indeed, so we have a medical community. Technologies.
I'm not hearing Peter properly. Does anybody else get the question?
You can't hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
We were.
Oh, I can hear you now. Okay, please go ahead again.
Okay, repeat the question. So it's in the medical community, challenges because they're not always leading edge technology. They're introducing some digital use these kind of solutions.
So Donald, for extra safety, in short, what type of skills in the medical community do you see needed to correctly implement all this type of technology?
Oh, right. Okay. Thanks for that question. So really what's happening, healthcare is undergoing digital transformation. So healthcare is a sector that's of necessity risk averse. So because you're dealing with people's lives, processes change slowly because you don't want to have the risk of and their healthcare is using chemistry-based drugs and everything else like that, and they're very risk averse. They do things slowly, but there are programs in all the healthcare sectors in Europe to do digital transformation because they realize that there can be benefits. If you look at the budget levels, some say in the financial sector, they're spending 10% of the budget in the financial sector gets spent on digital. In healthcare sector, it's maybe 5%. In some cases, it's even 1 or 2%. So they know that investments in digital have the whole potential to improve healthcare. All organizations are going through digital transformation, looking at how to use capabilities, what training is needed, what new technologies can be applied, how can the whole potential for say monitoring at home, how can the potential for pre-hospital video, how can these be put into current operating procedures, how to train people, how to get the right governance, how to get the right level of security. All of these things are being discussed at different levels in healthcare. I suppose the challenges are there, but equally the opportunities are there because there's the whole ascendancy of the eye over the ear, and they just know. And I think the pandemic has showed, like 5 years ago, you might have said, oh, hospitals will never adopt video. And then, of course, the pandemic came, and now all outpatient clinics, everybody's doing video. We have video now, and we might have had this as a summer school or something, and everybody would have traveled to the same place. And now these things are being done virtually. So video is just happening everywhere, and the pandemic has just showed that. And that's accelerated now in the healthcare system and just showing the potential. So I think it's going to happen, and I think everybody's putting in the learning, the digital transformation structures, digital transformation programs, how to upgrade the clinical work processes to enable these things to happen. So it's coming a bit slowly, but it's definitely coming. What's the next question?
Many thanks, Donald. Can you hear me better now?
I can hear you now, yes. Go ahead.
Yeah, I hope the connection stays stable. I think that was the main ones. There's also a bit of question on data. I thought there's always, of course, it's very sensitive data. Maybe just a quick view on how you see this data protection and how these solutions are respecting the GDPR, etc.
Yeah, so GDPR is really important. So there's lots of different aspects to that. So when we started our first video pilots on 4G, one of the discussions was, well, how are we going to get ethical approval to do this in the hospital? And the first answer was, well, it's going to give benefit, but we're not going to record anything. So even though technically we have the capacity to record, we don't. We just make the video live. So that's kind of a first part, is just to say, well, to enable ethical approval, we won't do recording. And then you want to say, well, what is the GDPR aspect within that? So GDPR is about data privacy. So it really means having policies for what data you're going to store. So if you're not recording anything, you stop a big part of the problem. But of course, you are processing data. And then what do you need to do around that? Well, you need to provide high levels of security. So there's probably there's 4 different layers of security that can be provided. And then, of course, you want to have the data within, say, a national area. Like this is on WebEx now, so maybe it's been used on a US video server or something. But maybe it's Irish. I'm coming from Ireland, and we're going across Europe. But I'm not sure where the video server it is. But there's 4 different layers of security that you can have. So the first layer of security is obviously the video traffic gets encrypted. So that means it can't be hacked because it's encrypted, and it's using encryption keys for secure web services. And then the second thing that's happening is, well, once you have 5G, you have the potential to use a private access point. So on your normal phone, you'd have a normal access point that would point you into the internet. But with these pre-hospital medical services, you have an access point that points you into a private network. And then within that private network, you have private addressing. So that's a third layer of security. You're using MPLS BGP to give private networking capability, private addressing, and the hospital service gets their own virtual private network. And then, of course, the fourth one is that the data servers can be in the mobile edge cloud of the 5G network. So instead of having them on a public cloud, say like the hyperscaler public clouds, you would put the data in a local server in a mobile edge cloud, and then the data would stay in the country. So say Amazon or Azure, these have servers all over the world, but they all kind of tend to concentrate in one area. But the whole idea of mobile edge cloud is that you can keep the data of the video and process it locally. So there are the different levels for security in GDPR.
Thanks, Donald. Very insightful. So we're a bit over time, but interesting. Many thanks. So you're, of course, welcome to stay also if we have time at the end to have some overall discussions.
Sure.
But I would now then go to our last speaker, Erzsébet Fittori from Vodafone. Of course, the operators are investing in the networks, deploying the networks, but also enabling the services. So I'm sure you have quite good ideas also what we can expect, also maybe how the evolution went through the generations and what we are now up to. So really happy to have you, and handing over to you now for the 15 minutes around presentation and then some questions, hopefully.
Thank you very much, Peter, for inviting Vodafone to this really interesting session. And it's a bit of a challenging task, I think, to be the last speaker when such distinguished experts have shared such a lot of information about the evolution of technology. So in the 15 minutes, what I will just try to focus on is maybe 4 things quite briefly, and then I can add detail or clarify anything if there are any questions. So first of all, I thought about just introducing a little bit what Vodafone Group does in the 5G space in particular. Secondly, to do a very brief recap on the technology capabilities and the different architectures of 5G in particular. Thirdly, to share a couple of use cases, what 5G could enable. And finally, I could not resist to also highlight the key policy areas that can help Europe accelerate 5G deployment and 5G investments. And we'll try to share my slides. First of all, maybe just to speak a little bit about Vodafone Group. As probably you know, Vodafone is a pan-European and global operator. We are operating mobile networks with more than 300 million customers. We are operating gigabit fixed networks, as well as what is less known, we are Europe's second largest EV platform provider. And also, we are quite a leader in 5G. We have commercial 5G services in 11 European markets. From an industrial and business application point of view, we are extremely proud actually to be the largest IoT provider. 160 million devices are connected to our IoT platform, and we have a huge ambition to increase that to 400 million devices over the next 5 years. The business use of technology and digitalization, enabling also the green transition, are extremely important objectives for us. And to date, we are connecting about 500,000 SMEs across 10 markets in the EU, and also 3 million SOHO customers. So what I thought about doing, and a lot has been explained already today, is to actually dive a little bit deeper into 5G, the different architectures and flavors of 5G, and what they can actually enable. Peter has mentioned in his opening speech that there is approximately 66% 5G coverage across Europe. And I think what is very important to understand is that whilst that is a very solid achievement, not all of it is really transformational 5G that can help the industrial digitalization or indeed enable the very new and very transformational use cases that we have just heard about from the previous speakers that could actually transform our daily lives. So to what you can see on this slide is really kind of the different flavors and architectures of 5G networks. And at the bottom, you see 5G non-standalone. So 5G non-standalone is essentially where an architecture where 5G antennae are deployed, but without a dedicated core network. So the traffic within the 5G access network is also transported via the 4G core, which means that latency improvements are quite limited, and also the number of devices that can be connected in a given area are also quite limited. When smartphones are connected to such a network, they essentially dial into both 5G and 4G, which is quite energy intensive. So essentially, besides a limited capacity improvement, there is no real massive difference compared to a 4G network, but the 5G icon will show up on the user's device. If you look at 5G standalone, here the big difference is that there is a dedicated 5G core network to transport the data to and from the internet, which reduces latency really quite significantly, and also allows about 10 times more devices per square kilometer to be connected. Energy consumption is also reduced by about 20%. If you look at, I think, transformational 5G, and that is the type of 5G that we believe can make a real difference for the competitiveness of European industries and can have a genuine transformational impact in our quest for digitalization. So this is essentially a standalone 5G network, but it combines both low band and higher band, so 700 megahertz and 3.5 gigahertz spectrum. And therefore, the rollout can be optimized to maximize both the available capacity as well as the area coverage simultaneously. Latency is also very low, and it is really providing gigabit speeds. So transformational 5G is becoming quite similar in terms of performance to a very high capacity fixed network with mobility as the added advantage. And then finally, you can combine transformational 5G with MAC. And that means that you can actually reduce the latency to extreme low latency and enable real-time applications. And that can enable, smart factories, augmented reality, connected driving, you name it. So essentially, I think if we want to just quickly summarize, make this, yes. Then the three key dimensions of 5G that can make a huge difference is really increased capacity and the extreme high end with extended mobile broadband that I think Francesca has spoken about, with up to 10 gigabit per second, feeds massive machine type communications with 100 more times 100 times more devices than LTE, reducing latency to ultra reliable low latency, so really 1 megabit per second latency. And the dimension that I haven't mentioned on the previous slides is network slicing, which then allows essentially a flexible design of the network, slices to the needs of different customers. And then if you combine it with capacity, latency, these different dimensions can be also guaranteed. On this slide, what you can see is core to cloud to edge continuum, but I think that Maxime had a fairly similar slide. So in the interest of time, I will actually just zoom into the capabilities of the type of edge products that Vodafone is very much focused on, which is what you see in the middle, dedicated edge and distributed edge. So when it comes to dedicated edge, then there is a small dedicated server deployed at the customer side. So for example, at a campus network, and it is then combined with private LTE or 5G slicing. Now, what is the real advantage of dedicated edge? A real advantage is that all data is processed and stored on the location. It doesn't leave the site. So it can be really ideal for, on the one hand, applications which required at the site, then also for high levels of compliance with all sorts of legal requirements and maximum data security. It's really ideal for bandwidth intensive applications like, for example, a smart factory, which also requires ultra low latency. I will speak about the smart factory application over the next slides. The other type of edge that we are really leaning into is distributed edge. Here we essentially integrate both compute and storage functions at the edge of our 5G or 4G core networks. And this is, if you combine it with 5G, it enables super fast connectivity and very low latency. And it also enables an ideal for real-time applications, which are not necessarily local applications. At the same time, as you could see on the previous slide, you can combine it also, of course, with a public cloud, and then you can benefit from the scalability and flexibility of the public cloud. So what does it all enable? What it enables is really, I think, an industrial transformation via digitalization. And from our perspective, Industry 4.0 is actually quite broad. So it is really the digitalization of industry, but not only manufacturing, also public sector, SMEs, the different healthcare applications that we have heard about, transport, agriculture. And this is all very much built on transformational 5G, as I said, which combines a very wide area coverage coming from the low band spectrum usage, high capacity coming basically from the high mid-band spectrum usage, and also very low latency delivered by a 5G core. Moving on to a concrete example. So what you see here is a general example of smart manufacturing. What would that mean? So in this case, what it could mean is having a 5G mobile private network combined with MEC, and smart manufacturing becoming a reality. So this means that you can have a very extreme number of devices connected. So for example, on a manufacturing site, you can have the sensors, the robots that you can see on the screen, but also smartphones of the workers connected. Of course, in a small dedicated area, very large amounts of data can be transmitted in a very short period of time. So all the data from the AI algorithms, which are dedicated to each manufacturing function that is present in a factory. And then real-time applications, so augmented reality or indeed robots can be used. As you can see, there are many advantages and advancements that can be achieved via such an application. But maybe what I would call out is just a few, I think, in the interest of time. So, for example, to increase asset availability. Why? Because if you use predictive maintenance, then actually the downtime of machines can be significantly reduced. Also, monitoring can be made smarter, and it can be focused on the conditions of the machines rather than general monitoring. And then you can also increase the overall factory performance, given that you have a much broader performance visibility of the assets, of the lines, of the different multi-sites of the factory. You can remove production bottlenecks to maximize yield, and also what it also enables is that operational data can be made available across silos. I will also just highlight from this the importance of improving product quality and reducing waste at the same time, and that it is being developed in partnerships, meaning that there is a cross-functionality across different systems, as you can see in the bottom right corner, at least the bottom right corner of my screen. The next example is, I'm sorry, it's moving very slowly. Is agriculture, but I can't make it move. Yes, agriculture. This is something that has been already piloted as a project, agriculture from the sky in a Dutch rural area. According to the Commission's data, only 40% of people in rural areas, 40% of people in rural areas did not have access to fast broadband connections in 2020. And indeed, in order to process data quickly, very capable and high level of connectivity is necessary. So this is something that a Dutch company called Agrifly try to bring to farmers. Essentially, they are using drones to help farmers monitor their crops and basically provide information on soil densification, overplanting, or indeed predict emerging diseases spreading on a potential farm. The way this is happening is actually in order to inspect, let's say, 10 hectares of land, 4 multispectral cameras take 300 pictures each. Now that is 1,200 pictures, which a software then amalgamates into an overall map to visualize the photosynthesis of the crops. When you have a rural type of connectivity, a low bandwidth, that it can take actually hours to have these images processed. So therefore, Agrifly, the University of Groningen, and Vodafone Ziggo are using 5G to solve the problem and reduce the processing time to a matter of minutes. So I think these were my 2 main examples, manufacturing and agriculture, and that takes me to the last point as to what is really needed from a policy perspective in Europe to move the dial on 5G. So 66% coverage, as Peter said, sounds high, but approximately only 20% is truly transformational 5G. So what do we need in order to get 5G accelerated and for Europe to catch up and ultimately lead in the 5G race and enable the digital and green transitions? Efficient scale, this is a scale game, and operators need to have sufficient and sustainable scale to be able to accelerate their investments in pretty expensive transformational 5G networks. Spectrum policy is absolutely crucial to support 5G investments and then investments going forward in the next generations of mobile networks. We're all waiting excitedly for the Connectivity Infrastructure Act to help with reducing the rollout costs as well as making deployment of networks more efficient and less time consuming. State aid guidelines for rural use cases and rural coverage, but also to crowd and private investments are absolutely crucial. Policy and funding support to accelerate innovation to making essentially networks ultimately more secure and resilient going forward, and a fair internet ecosystem where we have an adequate framework where everyone who is having an advantage of our high capacity networks is contributing proportionately. Thank you very much. I will stop here and look forward to your questions.
Many thanks, Erzsébet. Very interesting, especially also the very illustrative use cases and how this could work. We're more or less on time with 12 o'clock. Maybe if Alex allows us, we can take a couple of minutes to look at some of the main highlight questions. Unfortunately, we won't be able to address all of them. Maybe 2 we could pick. One was, there were several ones on slicing and the request to explain that a bit more in easy terms. And then another one related to that, how are they negotiated? Can maybe either Erzsébet or also Donald, you also mentioned it in some specific areas. How are these arrangements negotiated between users and operators? So first, maybe for dummies, what is the network slice? How does it work?
So essentially, in a 5G network, and I am not an engineer, so I can only explain it in simple terms. So essentially, what you can do in the 5G network is that you can have dedicated network slices across the entire network, where you can calibrate the performance characteristics to a specific use case, and you can guarantee a specific speed, a specific capacity, a specific latency that is very much tailored to the needs of the end user. And then you can provide that, as I said, across your entire network. And that gives essentially an enormous amount of flexibility to develop use cases and dedicate different slices in the network to these quite distinct characteristics of the different use cases. So I think that would be a very, very simplified explanation of what network slicing is. And maybe I think on the actual negotiations, I will hand over to one of the other speakers. But I think that what I can say from a Vodafone perspective is that it's very important for us that we actually develop end-to-end solutions in partnerships with other partners. So we do not really see ourselves as a traditional telco, but more a tech comms company that is actually leaning in with its own knowledge to create ecosystems, but we also bring together the knowledge and expertise, of course, of experts who know about our agriculture or who know very well how manufacturing processes work. And then that we combine with our network and engineering knowledge on how to actually manage the digitalization. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Donald, any insights how you would see a network slice available for a hospital or for a medical service being provided and paid for? How would it work, do you think?
Well, technically how it works, there was a very good description from the way Vodafone described it there, so very nice. I'd say it's the same thing, really. It's basically it's resources, and the resources are ready resources are configured differently to do different things for different people, and that's what really a slice is. And then you get privacy and all of these things because it's all separated. How does it get paid for? Well, it gets paid for because it's giving value. So if you think about improving healthcare, if you can save on an ambulance event, like an ambulance event costs about 550 euros. So if you save on one ambulance event by having, say, one video call, then you save 550 euro. So you can apply that type of model to make the ambulance services more efficient. If you think about a doctor, and I described earlier, one doctor, he told me on the shift he walked 17 kilometers. If he can save that amount of time by using some of his time by using 5G capabilities, then that's a huge amount of extra resource that becomes available, and the whole health service becomes more efficient. So you can bring those efficiencies and cost savings in to justify, to make an economic case. You know, the infrastructure provided by Vodafone and other operators will support that, and it's an ecosystem really as well. It's the infrastructure provider is required in the loop, and they have the network and they have the mobile edge cloud, and then there is the application provider, and then there's the end users, and all of those three groups are needed in the ecosystem to make an end-to-end value chain work, to reduce costs, improve efficiencies, and improve patient outcome in healthcare. And actually, one of the pictures I showed, actually, was from Groningen as well, in the northern part of the Netherlands. And we did use a Vodafone 5G network in Groningen. So that's an amazing synchronicity already. So nice to see that. So what other questions are there?
No, that's already quite useful. I think maybe we're also a bit at early days that these kind of example SLAs, I think many of these things are a bit still in pilot stage and so on. So maybe we don't have so many cases where real slices are actually signed in a contract between the different players. So this we will see in the coming years how this will be evolving. I see in the Slido, I hope you can still hear me because I have some network cuts. Maybe one last one is also on the security side. I think we also had, this was a theme of the Connect University, especially here, also on the health context and mainly authentication authorization. Are there still limitations? Is there still things to be worked out that this is all secure and everyone can only get access to these services and no third parties, etc.? How do you see this evolving? Maybe Donald again.
Yeah, so there's four, really with 5G and with slicing, there's four levels of security that can happen. So the first level of security is that the data gets encrypted. So that's the first level of security. Then using on Vodafone's network, you can have private APNs. So that means that as your cell phone connects to the internet, it doesn't really go onto the public internet, it goes into a slice. So that's giving a second level of privacy. And then the third level of privacy is that you use a private VPN to backhaul all of the traffic and connect everything together, connect the radio network, connect that with, say, a hospital site or with an emergency call center. So that's a third level of security because you're using private IP addressing. So if you use private IP addressing, then it only stays within the slice. And then the final version is, of course, all the 5G operators are looking now at mobile edge cloud, and that means that they're storing the data on their servers instead of being outside of the network. The servers are inside the network, and that just provides a fourth level of security to give more privacy. So you just want, really for healthcare anyway, you want as much security as you can get, and the methods that we're using can deliver on that.
Very good. Then maybe final question, which is of course an important one and discussed a lot: energy efficiency of 5G networks. So we are 5G networks. So we have seen, I think, also in Francesca's presentation, that you can halve the energy consumption of different sectors, so which is super impressive. So that's the big plus, let's say, so that these technologies are delivering or the potential. But then, of course, you also have the, let's call it the homework that we have to do to make sure that these networks are not consuming too much energy. So, and this is worrying a lot of people, of course, and it's a challenge for sure. Francesca, any views on that one? How do you see the energy consumption when we move on in the generations? What are the challenges?
Yeah.
How could we solve it?
Well, let's say opportunities, more challenges, right? Let's go like that. Yeah, absolutely. Energy saving or energy efficiency is one of the most important, or the most target of the current, even not current generation, not only the next one. Of course, there are a lot of implementation factors, how you deployed the base station or the network in general, how the maturity of the network, because of course a base station of 10 years consume more than a base station for the latest generation. So even the modernization of the network is essential. But for the next generation to come, also the artificial intelligence, machine learning, and the prediction of the traffic model and the traffic pattern play a key role. Because if you know exactly where, for example, let's think about a train, right? A train goes in a very predeterministic rails. They don't go everywhere. So you know exactly when the train passes through each single cells. You can really predict when the people are under that cells, and you can boost the capacity when the train is in that cell. But when the train passes away and it go in another cells, you can really reduce the capacity in the previous cells. So you can really tailor the capacity based on the people, location, and say you can really save a lot of energy. Just an example, right? So that was an example.
That's very illustrative. Good. Maybe let's conclude with maybe Elizabeth has also something to say on that one, and then we slowly conclude, I think. Elizabeth?
Yes, thank you very much. Just to add to, I think the very, very good explanation by Francesca that, of course, it doesn't reduce energy usage per se, but I think what is also very important that we run our networks 100% on renewable energy. So I think the type of energy source is quite important. And secondly, I think moving forward, something to discuss also with regulators and the Commission is the switch off of legacy networks also in mobile. So to the switch off of 2G and ultimately 3G networks, which can save, of course, energy. Thank you.
Excellent. Many thanks. Maxime, sorry, we didn't come back to you. Any final thoughts?
No, don't worry. I think that it was brilliant, the different introductions, and I mean, the last one was really demystifying a lot of the step-by-step expectations of 5G. I really appreciate it. Now, on the slicing, I think that there are a lot of opportunities to gain in the verticals. And for example, I'm just thinking of the road operators and the traffic managers that could start really exploiting these in a way that they could handle their traffic management data collection all on slices, and they have been expecting. I think the most difficult at the moment is to explain them exactly what it's all about, how much it's going to cost, how much it's going to save them at the end of the day in terms of saving from their sensor infrastructure, etc. And so there is still quite some work to do in some of the sectors to grasp the opportunities that 5G offer.
That's very nice and wise closing thoughts. So I would say we're a bit over time, and I don't want to hold you and the participants back from a well-deserved lunch break. So many thanks for your support here to be with us. Also, all the participants to ask questions was really very lively and interesting. And yes, let's keep in touch. We have also some events coming up, and you mentioned it, Maxime, also with the transformation, the different deployments, how it will evolve. We have the 5G. Announce it end of October, so that might be also interesting to look a bit more closely into how these networks evolve, what are the latest developments, and policy-wise how we move forward. Many thanks. All, and I wish you a nice afternoon and weekend.
Bye. Thank you so much. Bye-bye,
Yes,
everybody.
thank you all for the insights.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Let's see each other at 2 for the Commission's view of the week and give overview of what might happen in the future in terms of sustainable digital infrastructures. Thank you very much and have an easy day ahead.